Now, the government's relaxed, as you just heard, its ban on overseas buyers, allowing foreigners to purchase apartments off the plans as long as they then rent them out. Well, Ashley Church is the Chief Executive of the Property Institute of New Zealand and he's with us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Pippa.
That's good news for you?
Oh, good news, I think, for the market. So the background to this is a couple of weeks ago, Stats New Zealand came out with those numbers on how many people were actually how many foreign investors were investing in the New Zealand market. And at the same time, we had a chat with you guys about the fact that the Select Committee was considering some changes to that legislation based on some of the submissions. We've now got that report with those recommendations from the Select Committee. There are a few proposed changes worth mentioning. I think that these are some practical and pragmatic changes to what is still an unnecessary piece of pretty bad law.
Let's talk about, just explain to me what these changes are then.
Sure. The key changes amongst it are that Singaporean buyers will now be treated the same as New Zealanders and Australians, and that's really just tidying up the fact that those potential buyers of property have some trade agreements that basically require that to happen. That certain land purchases will now be allowed that wouldn't have been. For example, a foreign company that might have owned a telecoms company that needed to build cell towers wouldn't have been able to have bought land for those cell towers under the provisions of the Act as it was originally enacted. So that's a pragmatic change? Absolutely. All holders of residency visas will now be able to buy property. Previously it was only going to be people who held permanent residency visas. Now it's going to be anybody that holds any sort of residency visa at all. And in certain cases, people who purchase hotel rooms or in a new development or multiple rooms will be able to retain ownership of those for longer than a year as long as they lease them back to the hotel. Probably the main one though, because there was this big concern around there was going to be a provision in the legislation that said that foreign investors could buy if they were building a new dwelling, but they could only hold that dwelling for 12 months. Under the provisions of the recommendations, that's now gone, and so they can purchase, as long as it's in a multi-storey apartment building or in a rental property, they can purchase new dwellings and they can own those for much longer periods of time. For longer,
but they have to rent them out.
Yes, they do. They can't actually live in them themselves.
Why is that change significant?
Well, that's really significant because in the drive to create new dwellings and build more homes, particularly in Auckland, there was a real concern, particularly given that the New Zealand banks have kind of backed away from the apartment development market over the last couple of years. There was a real concern that foreign investors were kind of the last cab off the rank in terms of providing some of that funding. And if you took them out of the market, essentially you were taking away a really important plank of that strategy of building more property.
Were we seeing developments being halted because they weren't getting investment coming through?
Oh, yes.
We were seeing that?
Yes, we were. Not just in respect, to be fair, of foreign investors, but in respect of the entire market. There's a real slowdown at the moment and some real concerns around the stall in that market at a time when we need them more than we ever have.
So do you think this is the injection that's required? Are we going to see those things getting up and running now?
Oh, look, this is just one of a number of solutions. I mean, I still have, as you probably know, some bigger concerns around how this whole market's being dealt with and these various deleterious policies on one side, which are almost designed to destroy the prospects of development on the other side. This is a small concession in the right direction, but there's a whole range of stuff that's going to need to happen if we're going to fix the market.
There is still a group of people who will go, all foreign buyers are going to buy it. We're not going to be able to buy the home we want. We're not going to be able to buy the apartment. I can see
You can tell by the body language.
I can feel it coming from you, Ashley. That in your mind is just not a problem at all.
Look, it was always nonsense, Pippa. To be fair, why this has come about in the first place is it was a silly figure of 30% that was thrown out by a party that didn't expect to be in government a year or so back, who suddenly found themselves in government and had to justify the stance that they'd taken. This was ideological nonsense, and that's not just my opinion, that's reinforced by those stats department figures that came out a couple of weeks ago, which basically confirmed about 3% of purchases of properties in New Zealand are foreign investors. It was just rubbish, and it's still nonsense, and the basis of the legislation actually isn't sound.
You would like to see it completely gone altogether?
Oh, it should be gone. It's a silly piece of legislation for ideological reasons, and instead of actually saying, Parker coming out and saying, hey, look, the stats have actually proved us wrong, he claimed they vindicated him. They simply didn't.
Look, always good to catch up with you, Ashley. Thank you for coming in this morning. Ashley Church, CEO of Property Institute New Zealand.